Welcome to Your True Calling. I'm so glad you're here. I'm Dr. Michelle Chappell, a psychologist and a rock star. I've helped thousands of people find their true purpose by discovering their one-of-a-kind superpowers. Each week, I'll share tools and client success stories to help you find gifts you don't know you have so that you can thrive in a career that fills your soul and passion projects that make you feel whole. Hello, dear listeners. Today, I'm excited to talk to my good friend, Hannah Onstad, who has an inspiring story to tell us about how she answered her calling to write fiction and become an author after she climbed the corporate ladder. We're going to discuss what keeps us from following our purpose early in life, even after we've gotten a glimpse of our gifts, and the role that synchronicity can play in reminding us of why we're really here. We're also going to talk about how to honor our calling later in life and why that matters. Let's get into it. Hi, Hannah. I'm so happy that you're on my podcast today. I've been wanting to do this with you for a very long time.
Me too. I am so excited to talk with you today.
Goody. So we've known each other for a long time. You are one of the very first students I ever taught as a psychology professor and also one of the very best. So thank you for that and bravo.
Thank you so much. That's so good to hear. And you are one of my favorite all-time professors. And at the time that you were my professor, you were probably the youngest professor at our school at New College. And I think you were the most dynamic. And it was such a pleasure to be in your class. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Oh, I'm loving the way this is starting out. It's a lot of trust.
Yeah.
For new listeners, this podcast helps people find their hidden superpowers, talents and passions that come naturally to them, but they may not be aware of having yet. Often, once people embrace their unique gifts, they find their true calling, but not always right away. And Hannah, you have what I think is a very inspiring story about how you answered your calling to write and be an author later in life that I can't wait to get into. But I thought first, I'd just like to talk about how we met and find out more about what were you studying at New College and what did you get your degree in?
Sure. I think I went into college not really knowing what I wanted to do. And the beauty of the amazing New College at that time was that you could really chart your own path and you could study whatever you wanted, provided you could find a professor who would help sponsor you. And so there was a lot of freedom. And I knew that I was interested in languages because I had studied Spanish. I had grandparents that lived in Spain. I had another grandparent who spoke to me only in Polish, and languages were really important. But then I was also interested, I think when we were working together, I was interested in how language was stored in the brain. I was also interested in, this part of South Florida, which had a large and very diverse population, just learning more about the history of Tampa and Ybor City. So I was really able to combine all of those things in a degree in language, culture, and society. There were a handful of students before me, and I'm sure many more after me, who did this interdisciplinary major.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
I knew I was going to learn new things about you. And were you doing any writing at the time? Did you know that writing was something that was interesting to you?
Yes, I was. And I really have been since I was maybe 5 or 6. I mean, since I learned how to write, I pretty much was writing. But I also had this very sort of grandiose idea of the canon, of what it meant to be a writer. And I thought that was sort of reserved. You always needed to know more. I, for whatever reason, I felt like I was perpetually a student in that regard, and I didn't really try to publish until much later. And, was able to publish nonfiction work, Probably in the last 10 years. I think prior to that, I was really kind of busy with my work writing and work life and family life, and couldn't devote time to actually putting my work out in the world.
So when you were 5 or 6, it's so great because I was going to ask you this question. How old were you when you first discovered you could write? Were you writing anything as a young girl?
Yeah.
And so what were you writing?
Well, it's funny. My mom had gone on a trip and she came back, and I'm pretty sure she must have been like in the airport gift shop or something and just picked up two blank journals and brought them home. But when she gave them to me, when she came home from her trip, I thought they were so precious. What was I going to write in these journals? And I had probably just learned to write. And so I decided to devote one of the journals to poetry and the other to writing a mystery. And I guess I had been, sort of exposed to mysteries, like everything from, Scooby Doo to maybe, I don't know if I really got as sophisticated as Agatha Christie at that point, but later I did. And I was sort of interested in mysteries, but I didn't really understand plot or structure. So I would write these sort of elaborate mysteries that would just go on and on and on and never get solved because I really didn't know how to solve them.
I just wanted to share I did that too. I did that too. I would come up with the weirdest things because I didn't understand life yet.
Yeah, so I was, 6 years old, and I was writing about Holly Carter and her friends and the Great Key Mystery, and they would go on. The plots just, it was hilarious. So, but I actually found them not that long ago, and I think my very young mind said at some point, I don't know how to end this. I don't know how to write. And when I look back on what I wrote 50 pages as like a 6 or 7 year old. Like I wrote a lot and it wasn't really bad. It was like I just never really received the mentorship of knowing how to take the next step, how to go to the next place. But it's funny how critical we are when we're younger, and the things that might take us away from our path, that self-doubt, that critical voice. And then when we look back, we think, oh, we were so close. If only something, we needed one more ingredient, or we needed one more um, kind of step to take, and we might have abandoned our work too early.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I'm sure a lot of listeners can relate to that too. Did you feel like there was anybody supporting you at home? I mean, your mother bought you the journals, but did you have any sort of support or at school for your writing?
By the time I was in middle school, I was in this really interesting sort of pilot school where there was also a lot of freedom. It was kind of like the middle school version of New College in a way, but we had some freedom, and I definitely wrote film scripts, and I did do some writing there. I think at that time, um, there wasn't really a sense of this is a path that you could take in life that would support you and generate a career. There was a lot more emphasis on doing something very practical
Mm.
and something that was more assured. The idea of an artist's life was kind of poo-pooed in this sort of working class town where it seemed grandiose, and it seemed like it wasn't really going to help you in the long run. And so I think that I sort of tucked it aside.
That's a really good insight. Again, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Me too. I wasn't supposed to become a singer-songwriter. My mother thought that was the worst idea in the world.
Well, mothers are very practical. Mothers have to, they have to take the long view, and so I think, there was sort of a dearth of role models, right? We didn't see exactly what we wanted in the world, or if we did, we weren't close to it. And that does actually bring me to an interesting story. What kind of brought me back? And when I was young, probably in middle school, this book came out by Fran Lebowitz, And they were sort of comedic essays about living in New York. And I was living in New Jersey at the time, Bayonne, New Jersey. And, you know, I thought this book, somehow I got a hand on this book. I think my mom bought it at Garden State News, which was our kind of glorified newsstand bookstore. It was probably more sophisticated than she thought. Like in the book, Fran Lebowitz writes about how she's chain smoking and procrastinating and not writing. That's kind of like the joke. But I thought this was so cool. And I, totally aspired to like have this sort of lifestyle, and life went on many, many years later. And in 2018, a friend of mine, Fran Lebowitz, was coming to speak in Berkeley. And a friend of mine actually bought me a ticket because he knew that how much I loved Fran Lebowitz. And I got to meet her. I got to go up to her and just say a few words at this little reception before she spoke. And I told her, I said, when I was a young girl in Bayonne, New Jersey, I read your book and I just thought it was the greatest thing. And, I've just always remembered how much it meant to me. And she said, so what are you writing? And I was taken back, like, what? Nothing. But it sort of just crystallized for me that that was really embedded in my love of her book, this desire to do this myself. And it was almost like Fran Lebowitz saw straight through me and asked what I was writing, like asked me if I was writing. And I was so taken aback, and then also a little bit ashamed to say that I wasn't writing. I mean, probably now when I think about it, she probably says this to a lot of people. It might not be that she saw into my soul, but in that moment in 2018, I really felt she had. And so it put like a little seed in my mind. And then a couple things happened after that that kind of, nourished and that seed began to really sprout and flourish.
So she continued to be a role model for you.
She did in some weird way. She did. I mean, there's a gap there of almost, too many decades, to mention. But yeah.
That's one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, because you came back to
Yes.
your calling. And it's never too late to do that. And I think your story is very inspiring. But I wanted to say that I went on LinkedIn and looked you up, which I never had before. And I was so blown away. You're very impressive. Did you?
Oh,
You are. So, but I did notice something, and maybe I'm wrong here, but so I saw you were marketing director at Peach Pit Press,
yes.
also at Harlow in the UK. And then you went on to Pearson as an associate publisher, and then you climbed the ladder to VP. And all of these are involved in publishing or books, or they were business books and technology books, but it was books.
Yes.
Did that like mean anything? Or is that just something weird that I noticed?
No, of course, it's true. I mean, basically, I have these beloved books from when I was a kid. One of them was Charlotte's Web. One of them was Stuart Little. I mean, we're talking very young. But I opened those books and I saw they were published by Harper and Row. And so my very first job out of college was at Harper San Francisco, which is a division of Harper and Row. And it was, what am I going to do with myself? I need a job. And I wanted to get as close to the life that I wanted even then, but I knew that I needed to work. And so that sort of brought me to publishing, and pretty much I had a career in publishing ever since.
That's actually ingenious. And also the artist way. I remember her talking about, Julia Cameron talking about shadow artists. So people who hang around people who are doing what they really want to do. So
Yes.
it's a little of that.
Yes, because I think my motivation was, well, I know nothing about this whole world, and I want to learn as much as I can. And but it's interesting because, there is a sort of divide. Like one is publishing is a little bit more of a commercial business, and writing is more of a craft or an art.
Mm.
And I sort of began to see myself less as a practitioner of the craft and the art, and more on the side of promoting people who did that, publishing them, helping them get their work out into the world. And I did learn a lot as a result, but it sort of reframed who I was. And I do think it takes a lot of courage to hold fast to your dream and do the creative work when you're getting a lot of messages, maybe from those around you saying, be more practical, do something else. And so I have to say, I listened to those voices, but I also had in the back of my mind, what can I learn that may take me closer to this life that I want. And it reminds me of this quote. Now, I'm not a huge Charles Bukowski fan, but I think he did say something really interesting. He said, sometimes you lose sight of what you wanted and who you were. Can you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be? And I think that is so great because he really nails it. And so it's kind of maybe midlife or, maybe later in life, you can open yourself to that message and really remember who you were meant to be.
Hello, dear listeners. I wanted to take a pause and check in with you. I am just loving these beautiful insights that Hannah is sharing with us. I have had the honor of working with thousands of clients, and I can tell you with absolute certainty that no two of us are alike, that each one of us is born with a sole purpose and a special set of gifts to answer that calling. Carl Jung has a very interesting idea about the way the world works. He says in the first half of life, we start our families and we get our careers off the ground. We make money. But in the second half of life, we start wondering what it's all about. It's important to us to find meaning and purpose. And that's often when people have their so-called midlife crisis and start doing some inner work to figure out, why am I really here? So in Hannah's case, she knew that she had a passion for writing, and she was also told by the world not to take that seriously and to do something practical. The same thing happened to me. The only difference is I couldn't wait because I heard the calling to become a rock star, and I was already in my late 20s, and it matters what you look like in that world. So I had to go for it when I was fairly young. I actually ended up leaving a career as a psychology professor to pursue that career because I knew if I didn't do it then, I was never going to be able to do it. And it seems to me that our younger generations are having to do those two different phases that Carl Jung spoke about at the same time because life is short and they're not sure how long they have to live because of global warming, because of COVID. They tell me so. I work with Gen Z and millennials all the time. And so they feel pressured right now. Maybe you as a listener feel pressured right now to follow your purpose while you have to make money. And that can make you feel crazy because often following your calling means digging out a gift that was not supported by the people around you and using that gift to find your full expression in the world. And that does not always bring money right away. The most important work you can do in this world is to understand and embrace the gifts that you were born with because they make you different from everyone else. They're why you are here. It is possible to find work that aligns with your values. In Hannah's case, she was able to get a job in the publishing world while remembering in the back of her mind that she wanted to be a writer. In my case, I took a risk and I decided that I was going to try to be a rock star. But while I was doing it, I taught part-time at University of California, Santa Cruz, so I could keep bringing money in while I was following my heart. That was easy because I still loved teaching. So ask yourself, if you could wave a magic wand and have the career you really wanted, the perfect job, what would it be? Give yourself permission to think about what you really want to do and see what pops into your mind. And it may not come right now, but just keep some space open and be aware that an answer may pop in to your mind later. Trust this process. I worked with a young woman in high tech who really hated her job. She complained that she was the only one who dressed up at work, a leopard print skirt in a sea of blue jeans, because no one cared what they looked like except for her. Well, she ended up getting a new job, still in high tech, but in the fashion industry. And another young man I interviewed who just loved baseball did not himself become a baseball player, but he got a job in sales and marketing for his favorite baseball team. And he couldn't be more ecstatic about it. So in these two cases, they both aligned their work with their values, and they're so much happier. It is possible to do it, but you have to give yourself permission to understand what your values are and what your gifts are. It is possible to find products and services that you believe in, that you can get behind, and that will make all the difference in the world. And even if you don't answer your calling right away, you can be sure that some interesting synchronistic event is going to come to remind you of what it is, because your calling never stops calling. And I'm pretty damn sure that Fran Lebowitz appeared in Hannah's life to remind her of why she's really here. That was no accident. Next, we're going to talk about how Hannah has other superpowers and how she combines them all together now to answer her greater calling. So, I looked up some of the things that you were doing in these various jobs, and I'm just curious if these are also superpowers of yours or if they're not. So, strategic thinking, research, public speaking, presentations. I saw you listed those skills a few different times. Would you say those are superpowers as well? Because I think they could be.
You are so good at like naming things superpowers. I mean, I think also there's a tendency to kind of downplay our strengths sometimes. We kind of have to have our strengths. We have to be able to like list them, but then there's like a don't be too braggy. And so when you call them superpowers, I'm like, I think they kind of are. I mean, I think like strategic thinking does come pretty naturally to me, and there's sort of an organizational ability. I'm not the most organized, but when it comes to projects, I really do see how to get them done and how to break them into parts, and what the possible obstacles can be. So I feel like that level of thinking, I've really been able to develop that, and it is sort of useful to apply that in new ways. When you think about creative projects that are completely your own writing a novel, there's a lot of moving parts, and you do have to kind of keep them straight and keep them organized. And it's not exactly the same process, but I do see crossover.
That is so cool. I need those skills for my own writing. Remind me to talk to you later.
Yes, we all do.
Let's see. I remember it was almost exactly 10 years ago. I wonder if you remember this, that you and I went to a writer's pitch in San Francisco together. Do you remember that?
I do remember that.
And you went there with an idea for a book. And I remember you telling me that a couple of the publishers really liked that idea. do you remember that? And do you remember were you actually writing that book or were you just thinking about it?
That's so interesting when you tell me how long ago it was, because
About 10
it
years.
was it was a seed of an idea, and I had really two ways in my mind that it could go, and I've continued to work on that kind of on and off, as well as just writing, short stories. But that is really the seed of the novel, and it's really kind of expanded in scope since then. But that is probably like when I first really began to think of it as a side project, as a book, as a thing that I could work on creatively. And I was premature to be pitching it that early. But I've learned a lot since then.
I just remember thinking how ballsy you were to do that because I was pitching a book that I actually had written. And the only publisher who really seemed to like it was the youngest publisher in the room. She thought it was a great idea. So
Oh,
I
that's so
it's
great.
meant for a younger audience. So yay.
Well, I can't wait for your book to make it into the world, because I've read parts of it and it is so good. Everything you write is so good.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I just wanted to, this is just sounding like a total love fest, but that's okay because that's what the reason why I wanted to do this podcast is because you went to graduate school a couple of years ago and you got an MFA in writing. You just got it like in May, right? Went
Yes.
to St. Mary's College. I am just so, I love it. I love that you did that. And I wanted to ask you about it. So, first of all, I wanted to ask you, why did you finally do it? Why then?
Hmm. Well, it's so great. I'm glad that you're asking. It's funny because I think we think of school, sometimes, our education as a means to get to a particular, you know, body of work or career. And for me, it was really, I was so interested in the learning at this stage in my life, and I could do it. I was doing it. I was writing on my own, but I also knew that there were things I didn't know. And I could take classes, on the weekend or in the evening, things like that. But I really wanted to set aside the time and to learn and to give myself permission to study what I love, learn everything I can, and continue to work on my work. And I had a class with an author, Chelsea Beaker, who I really love. I adore her work. She's written a novel called Godshot, and a collection of stories, Heartbroke. And I was talking to her and she just said, "Well, I learned a lot in my MFA." I was like, "Is it really worth it?" I said something like that. And she said, "Well, I learned a lot in my MFA." And I kind of went away and I thought about it and I said, "That's exactly what I need right now." So, yeah, I went back as an older student and I have no regrets.
I love it that you take in signals and signs from the universe, from people, and you really let them enter you. I think a lot of people go through life and those things bounce off of them. Do you
I
have any
think
idea why you're able to receive them?
I think I have a lot of respect for art, and I think art is an intuitive process. And I think when I look back on the periods of my life when maybe I wouldn't have done that, it's because of busyness. I mean, all of our lives are so busy now. There's so much we have to do, and we're kind of like just scurrying about. And sometimes we can miss the signs when we're too busy. And I'm purposely less busy right now. I've kind of gotten to a place where I've prioritized my work. My mornings are pretty free, as free as I can keep them. And I do have regular work in the afternoons, but I really do try to uh, hear those signs, see those signs, and then pursue them and allow myself that delicious pursuit of what is kind of attracting me right now. So, yeah, it's a gift to
It,
be able to do that.
it is. And I hope listeners pay attention to this because they're coming at you more often than you think. What did you actually do in that program? Were you given writing assignments? Were you reading each other's works or?
Yeah, a lot of MFA programs have the workshop model where you're bringing your work in and you're having a group, a cohort of peers read it and comment on it, as well as an instructor. And then you may have some additional classes that are really based on craft. You might be doing a lot of reading, a lot of looking at how, breaking down how authors achieve different effects or what they're doing in their work, and kind of learning how to talk about it. And I think that is really interesting. And then, by the end, you're creating a thesis, and that thesis really can be the basis for a book.
And you worked on your novel, right?
I started out working on the novel and I sort of switched to the short story form because I think I had a lot of unknowns about the novel still, and I wanted to guard it a little bit and continue to think about it while I brought work to workshop and got feedback. And so I felt like small, discrete pieces like short stories were easier for me to workshop than the novel at that time. And so my hope is to actually complete the novel and have a collection of short stories and try to find an agent with both of those things at the same time.
Oh, that's awesome. And it makes a lot of sense too. Sometimes you want to protect your baby a little bit.
And the idea that I had 2 years ago has also evolved. So, it's just a moving target until, you get to a certain point and you've pinned down a lot of the details.
Yeah, I also feel that way about the book I'm working on. So I know exactly what you mean. I finally really understand what it's about now.
Mhm.
It took me a long time. It's the same book I was pitching with you.
I think people don't realize because there's so many books and it seems like, oh, well, everyone's an author and everyone has a book. But, when you really start listening to authors, I'm listening to a lot of authors on the fiction side, and some of them will just say, it took me 6 years, it took me 10 years. This book has been in the works for a very long time. I've been thinking about it, um, and you realize what it takes to actually do this. I mean, that's one of the reasons why, people sort of give you advice to be practical because, to work on something for 10 years and not know the outcome, there's some risk in that. So we have to find our way. We have to find our balance as we do it.
Yeah. And patience, the long view.
Yes.
I also wanted to talk about your kick-ass book reviews. How
Oh.
how did you, because I know I read one that you had for the Harvard Review. How
Mhm.
did you come into doing that? Because you're really good at it, man.
Oh, thank you. That is so great. Well, it's interesting because all that time in publishing, um, I did I did write a lot of sort of copy for books. So I had a sense of like how to write book reviews that was sort of native, like I've written press releases and book jacket copy, and all of those early years really prepared me for that. And then uh I had done a book review for a reading group that I was in. And then when we came into the MFA program, one of our first classes was um, the assignment was to do a book review. And I tried to think about a book that I wanted to read, and then who would be most interested in a book review about it. And as it turns out, that book review that was published in the Harvard Review was about Claire Massoud, and she is a writing instructor at Harvard. And I really thought, oh, surely some, ambitious student from Harvard is going to review her book. But I pitched them and I don't know if anyone had, but maybe I was the first. And so they accepted mine, and it was lovely to have a book review published there. And then I also published one in the Hannah Arendt Journal, which is a publication of the Hannah Arendt Center for Politics and Humanities at Bard College. And that's just a great organization. And it seems like I'm writing more and more about women, women authors or women subjects, or stories about women. And I think that's just happening kind of naturally, organically.
I think that's wonderful. I also think the first example with the Harvard Review is using your strategic superpower. That was smart. That was very smart. And also it was beautifully written. So I'm not saying that that's the only reason you got in there, because it was great.
Yes, well, thank you. I do think like sort of as writers, we start out and it does sort of feel like we're just kind of throwing our work out there, like who would like this? Who would listen to this particular piece, And it feels like there's so many journals out there and so many possible ways to publish, but you have to, I mean, think about like what is the hook for the publication? Like why would they be interested? And that sort of comes from, having some familiarity with, PR and how journalism works and how, magazines editors think and literary journal editors think. So yeah, you have to put all your skills to use, I guess.
Yeah, one thing I'm seeing now, and I was thinking this was going to come out after looking at all the different things you've done. Some people have a lot of superpowers, and sometimes you use them at different phases in your life, and then you get to a point where you can use a lot of them at the same time. I think that you might be doing that, and the payoff is great for that.
Well, that is interesting that you say that because it does. I mean, we are sort of talking about coming back to things as an older, more mature person. And for me, when I was younger, I really didn't know what I wanted to write about. I really didn't have a vision for it. And I think that, coming to it at the age, like middle age, it's like I can both look backwards and forwards. I have a child. I've cared for an aging parent. There's a way in which time starts to make more sense to you as you age, and you see both how it's long and it's finite, and what can happen in a life. And that is really my motivator now. Like, I want to be able to capture that and put it on the page. And I don't think I was clear when I was younger about, you know, what the real opportunity was in telling stories.
Yeah, I really love that. So, my last question for you is for listeners who have not found their superpowers, or they know what they are, but they don't feel confident or ready yet to use them. Do you have any advice based on your own life?
Yeah, I would say, those clues, the things that you sort of allow yourself to listen to that might be just little blips, little seeds. Maybe they tie back to something that you were interested in when you were younger. Maybe they are a new interest that's just trying to percolate up and get your attention. But the first part is to kind of give yourself some room. Give yourself the possibility to dream and to listen to those signs, and then just slowly let one lead to the next one and build on them until you start to see something take shape. And I think that's sort of what I did.
What a beautiful way to wind things up. It's so inspiring. I'm going to include links to Hannah's Harvard Review, her LinkedIn site, and also an event that she has with an author on October 7th at 3 p.m. She will be in conversation with Manuel Munoz, author of The Consequences, at Orinda Books in Orinda, California. Again, that'll be on October 7th at 3 p.m. I'm sure you won't want to miss it. Hannah is a delight. Thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing your wisdom with us today. Thank you for listening to Your True Calling. Please leave a review and share it with your friends. From my website, yourtruecalling.org, you can follow me on social media, learn more about my music and my coaching, contact me to find your superpowers live on the air and help me produce future episodes by funding me on Patreon.